Next, we're going to take a look at Maelstrom, the grain table synthesizer. Now, what is a grain table synthesizer? It's a blend between two types of synthesis, wavetable synthesis and granular synthesis. Wavetable synthesis lets you take a wave, either a simple wave or a complex wave, and play back that wave. Granular synthesis lets you chop up a waveform into little tiny pieces called grains and put them together into a grain table, and you can determine where in that grain table you start and how fast you move through the grain table. So we're picking waves, either simple or complex, we're chopping them up into little pieces, and then we're determining how we move and shape those pieces. So let's initialize a Maelstrom patch. We're going to turn off everything, which I can do with these little switches here. And we'll start with an oscillator. Now, unlike something like Subtractor, the waveforms we can get here in Maelstrom can be extremely complex, and there are many, many to choose from. Let's start with an angel choir. And we can change the octave and the pitch. And then, because this is a grain table, we can determine where in the grain table we start to play back the angel choir. Let's try with another sound. Here's a breath sound. You can hear that that sound reverses itself. Some of the waves will play backwards and forwards, some will play just forwards. You don't have control over that. And then you have a control called motion, which determines how fast you move through the wavetable. The shift knob lets me change the pitch of the grains. And then there's an envelope which lets me shape the amplitude of this particular oscillator. Let's add a second oscillator. We'll pick from our list. Once again, you see real instruments like percussion, guitars, basses, then you see synths and effects, and then a whole bunch of different waveforms to choose from. I'll bring this one in a little after the first oscillator by making a longer attack, and I can set the volume of each of the oscillators as well. Above the oscillators, we have two LFOs. We can choose the waveform, we can sync that waveform to tempo, we can do what's called a one-shot where it only plays once, we can define the rate of that LFO and determine what it controls, for example, pitch. And the A-B switch determines which oscillator we're going to control. So now I'm just controlling oscillator A. And let's control pitch. Just a little bit of pitch variation there. Over here, we will control the motion of oscillator B. And I'll set it up to control the filter as well. And the filter envelope is over here. And here is my filter A and filter B. Two filters, each of which can be set to a variety of different filter types, including comb filters. And then you have something called a shaper, which shapes the oscillator before it gets to the filter. Gives you, again, lots of different sound shaping possibilities. And then by turning on these little switches, you can determine the routing. So this, for example, will let me go from oscillator A through to the shaper, or I can turn off the shaper and go directly to the filter. Or I could turn on one of these switches down here to have oscillator B or oscillator A go to filter B. You can even send filter B back to the shaper and so forth. So you can get pretty complex with your routing. And then lastly, on the left here, we have our settings for mod wheel and velocity that can be used to control different parameters of our synth. And that's an introduction to Maelstrom, the grain table synthesizer.